Welcome to today's explainer. We're going to be decoding a really vital difference today, the gap between reacting and responding. We throw those words around interchangeably all the time, right? But today we're going to discover why mastering the simple yet incredibly profound power of the pause can absolutely transform your physical health, your mental well-being, and honestly, your most important relationships. It's a real game changer.
Okay, here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the core difference. Take a peek inside your brain, weigh the price of reactivity, compare thermostats versus thermometers, and wrap it all up with some practical tools for mindful responding. Let's get right into it.
So, part one, the core difference. To really unpack this, I want you to imagine your mind as a house. And this house, it's equipped with two very, very different types of security systems. The first system is essentially an automatic, hypersensitive motion sensor. Think of it as a blaring alarm bell. Literally, the second a random leaf blows by the window, bam, it's blaring at full volume, zero questions asked. Now, the other system is totally different. It's more like a calm, wise security guard just hanging out at the monitors. When a sensor trips, this guard actually pauses. They check the cameras, realize, oh hey, it's just a leaf, and totally bypass the panic. And this perfectly illustrates our linguistic roots here. Think about it. A reaction, which comes from the Latin for to perform back, is just a split-second mechanical reflex. It's entirely designed to help you escape immediate discomfort. But a response, that means to answer back. It isn't a reflex at all. It's a mindful choice that comes directly from that tiny split-second delay we call the power of the pause. It actually requires you to process and translate your thoughts. As you can see here, stepping out of that autopilot mode to actually respond, well, it takes some serious mental effort. You're deliberately shifting the driver of your brain, but doing so totally flips your behavioral goal. You move away from seeking that immediate kind of selfish relief, and instead, you start aiming for constructive, values-aligned outcomes. Moving on to section 2, inside your brain. Let's pop the hood and see how this all works biologically by examining the brain's really fascinating dual control systems. First up, we've got the bottom-up pathway. Basically, this is your brain's rapid response alarm network. It uses the amygdala as a sort of smoke detector, the hypothalamus acts as the 911 dispatcher, your hippocampus flags past painful memories, and the insula amplifies the physical distress in your body. And guys, when this pathway gets triggered, it is unbelievably fast. I mean, adrenaline literally starts pumping through your veins before your visual centers have even fully processed what the threat actually is. Crazy, right? Then, on the flip side, we have the top-down pathway. If you want to choose an intentional response, you've got to recruit this slower, much more logical network. You're relying heavily on your prefrontal cortex. Think of that as your mental CEO. And that CEO works with the anterior cingulate cortex to assess the situation and send calming signals back down the chain to quiet that blaring alarm. But here is the biological catch, and it answers a huge question. Why on earth does our logic completely vanish when we're furious or terrified? Well, during a raw reaction, blood is physically diverted away from your CEO brain straight to your limbs so you can fight or flee. Your logic literally goes offline, which, by the way, perfectly explains teenagers. Since their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until they're about 25, they've got a fully functional gas pedal, but they're still building their brakes. All right, section 3, the price of reactivity. Now that we've mapped the brain, we really need to look at the severe biological stakes of living your life on defense. We really have to ask ourselves, what actually happens to your physical body when that internal alarm just never stops ringing? If your stress systems are constantly taking hits, or if you've got a broken off switch where you're obsessing way after the trigger is gone, or worse, total burnout, you start racking up a very, very dangerous physical toll. Scientists actually have a name for this toll, allostatic load. It's essentially the biological wear and tear, like a stress debt that builds up in your system. You can think of allostatic load almost like compound interest on a credit card. Every single unchecked, intense emotional reaction adds just a little bit more to what your body owes. And if you never pause to recover, your physical health is eventually going to crash. The journey from chronic reactivity to actual physical illness usually follows these 4 distinct stages. We start off at stage 1, which is just healthy, clean stress spikes that you recover from rapidly. Totally normal. But if the triggers don't stop, we slide into stage 2, piling on that baseline stress and losing restful sleep. That eventually spirals into stage 3, allostatic overload, where your physical brakes start failing and systemic inflammation goes up. And finally, that culminates in stage 4, actual, diagnosable, physical, medical damage. So, looking at this breakdown, the absolute crucial takeaway here is that letting your inner alarm bell just run wild will eventually ravage literally every major system you have. Whether that means flooding your neuroendocrine system with cortisol that accelerates aging, jacking up the blood pressure in your cardiovascular system, storing stress fat metabolically, or triggering autoimmune flare-ups. Constant reactivity is basically an invisible wrecker of your physical health. Let's shift gears a bit. Section 4. Thermostats versus thermometers. We've talked about physical health, but now let's explore how reactivity destroys interpersonal intimacy, and more importantly, how we can actually fix it. You know how it goes in arguments? Partners often fall into what's called co-dysregulation. They act like passive thermometers, just dangerously escalating tension by mirroring each other's anger until it's a runaway cycle. But look at the alternative. By choosing to act as a thermostat, practicing co-regulation, you actively set the climate. You become a calm, stabilizing force that can stop a fight dead in its tracks. And here's the coolest part. This interactive calm isn't just some nice, poetic metaphor. It is a literal, involuntary physical process. When you stay calm, the other person's brain uses mirror neurons to subconsciously imitate your relaxed state. Simple, supportive touch releases oxytocin, which physically drives their cortisol down. Your steady presence and gentle eye contact literally send a biological safety signal saying, hey, the danger is over, you can calm down. Okay, Section 5, Tools for Mindful Responding. We know the immense stakes here for our bodies, for our relationships. So let's zoom out and look at an actionable blueprint for actually rewiring these default habits. It all starts with building up your mental flexibility through something called cognitive shifting right in your daily life. It's about actively practicing this during routine, low-stakes events, like you hit a sudden traffic jam. Check alternate routes instead of just stewing in anger. Or your friend isn't texting back. Just assume they're busy, not secretly mad at you. Doing this strengthens those prefrontal cortex pathways you're going to desperately need when the massive life challenges hit. And that brings us to the highly effective STOP technique. This beautifully combines mindfulness with cognitive behavioral therapy to give you your control back. When triggered, first you S, stop. Immediately freeze to break that impulse. Then T, take a breath. A slow exhale to stimulate your calming nervous system. Next, O, observe. Just notice your bodily sensations without any judgment. And finally, P, proceed with intention. Choose a deliberate, values-aligned action. It's all about carving out that mental space. But wait, what if your emotional intensity is just way too high for the STOP technique to work? Like logic has completely left the building. In that case, you have to force your logic back online using severe physical grounding tools. We're talking a sudden temperature shock, like splashing ice-cold water on your face, or forcing your brain to do a complex cognitive task, like counting backwards from 100 by sevens. It violently pulls your focus away from the panic and anchors you firmly right back into the present moment. Finally, once your mind is calm and your inner CEO is back online, you've got to deploy some intentional communication rules, using I statements, asking genuinely curious questions rather than pointing fingers, and keeping the focus on forward-looking solutions. Doing this instantly shifts the dynamic. You go from a defensive, hostile battle to a productive collaboration, making sure you stay that co-regulating thermostat. As we start to wrap up this explainer, I really want you to keep this in mind. Responding with clarity, calmness, and purpose, it's not going to feel like a difficult chore forever. Eventually, it will simply become your new default state. And that's because your brain is incredibly adaptable. By practicing these simple daily tools, you will literally rewire your neurological pathways for good. So I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to carry with you today. Next time the inevitable stress hits and that internal alarm bell starts ringing, what are you going to do? Will you be a hostage to the noise, merely reacting to the discomfort? Or will you use the incredible power of the pause to step up as the CEO of your own mind? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.